You just got a 15-month license in London where you were at risk of losing it altogether. The original application was for 5 years. Is this a win or a setback?
It's definitely a win, and it's a win, though, but it's a win that requires us to walk the walk and to demonstrate that we are, in the words of the license, fit and proper. And I believe that we would not be here at this point had we not, in the preceding 7-8 months, where Dara, I think, really engaged in some extraordinary personal diplomacy. We would not, and there's been a lot of other things, changes, significant changes, structural changes, compliance changes that we have made to the way that we operate. We would not have gotten to this point had, I think, TfL and other observers really sensed a change in the way that we approach that market and the way that we're operating.
A representative for the taxi drivers suggested that you could be an Uber in sheep's clothing. Should we be worried about an Uber in sheep's clothing?
Well, the new Uber is what you see, right? I think that I think what I can say is that it behooves us to be as transparent as possible. It behooves us to be as upfront as possible. It behooves us to take accountability for things that went wrong, take credit for things that go right, and to be as open and upfront about where we see the company going. Look, we know a couple of things. One is Uber survives only if people trust us. Simple as that. They've got to trust us with their data. You have to trust us with your safety or the safety of your loved ones. And we have to earn that trust every day in the way that we operate. That's the mandate. And if we don't do that, we're going to lose. Simple as that. And so as you think about Uber being the mobility platform of the future, a place that you not only go to because you want to ride in a car, but because you want to get on a bike, because you want to take another mode of transportation. Soon, you want to get into an air taxi, right? When you think about the platform in that way, as a mobility platform, the idea and concept of trust and safety becomes even more important. And that means that it's got to be what you see is what you get.
The California Supreme Court recently ruled in favor of drivers for a document delivery company, which could have wide-ranging implications for Uber and other gig economy companies. Is Uber at all considering proactively making its drivers employees rather than contractors?
So, I think the Dynamics decision is a big decision, and the implications are far, far broader than just ride-sharing companies. Clearly, it affects us, but many more who use an IC model, an independent contractor model. And I think what it means is we have to kind of back up a little bit and be willing to engage a much broader, much more fundamental conversation about the gig economy and the opportunity that we want to create for individuals who participate in that economy. And so, what that means is, we have to have an honest conversation about, there doesn't need to be this false choice between security and flexibility. You ought to be able, in today's world, to have flexibility and security. Again, the partnership with AXA in the EU, I think, is a demonstration that you can do that. We have something called we contribute to something with other rideshare companies in New York to something called the Black Car Fund, which is actually administered by labor, but tries to essentially do what we've done in Europe for drivers in New York, and I think it could be a model for the rest of the country. But that really does require that we kind of come out of our ideological crouches and we engage an honest conversation about how can we make sure we create more and more opportunity in this new economy, which is not a whether, it's here. We have to grapple with it. We have to deal with it. Let's make sure we do it in a way that creates opportunity for everybody.
Could drivers become employees as a result? I mean, are the implications that big?
I mean, the implications, it's possible. I think, I think that could be one result. I personally don't think that's the right result, because I think at least in our business model and in the business model of so many others, that means that there is a great degree of flexibility that is then taken away. And there's a question of whether or not, even, that kind of business model can be as efficient and as effective. I think one of the things that's so important when you think about an Uber is the vast, vast, vast majority of our drivers, they drive less than 10 hours a week, okay? So these are individuals who are supplementing their income. They're individuals who are finding a way to drive on their schedule, on their terms. They ought to be able to not only engage in that practice, but have protections for them while they're engaging on the platform. And I think that's the win-win that we want to get to ultimately.
I would be remiss if I did not ask you about multiple criminal investigations that your former employer has into Uber, including one that the company paid bribes overseas, Greyball, where they used fake cars to avoid law enforcement, all of this allegedly. Hell software that was used to track Lyft drivers, whether Uber stole trade secrets from Waymo, and whether Uber violated pricing anti-discrimination laws. Any updates?
I now know what it feels like to be on the other side of me a few years ago. Look, without confirming any of that, look, I will say this. We continue to be very cooperative with regulators who are investigating a whole host of issues. That is the approach that Dara believes in. It's the approach I believe in. I think a couple of challenges that we engaged when we started. One was cultural change. That was job number one. As anybody will tell you, the most important, any CEO will tell you, the most important thing about a company is its culture. Everything else is secondary. So that was job number one. But the other thing that we really had to do is, work on what I call the regulatory shadow, the overhang that we want to continue to methodically move through. Fortunately, one of the things I encountered when I got to Uber was an incredibly talented team of lawyers who have been working on this and continue to work on this. And I think they now are working in an environment where we can engage regulators in perhaps a more cooperative way than has been the past, some observers may say. And I think that is benefiting the company. We still have work to do. We still have to what I say is earn that benefit of the doubt that good, strong public companies that have a long track record of working well and doing well, they've developed that so that when a mistake happens, regulators look at that as an aberration as opposed to the way of doing business. If you have a company that doesn't have that track record, you don't have that benefit of the doubt, and so we want to create that for Uber.
You are working with regulators in Tempe, Arizona, where a self-driving Uber killed a pedestrian. We have heard that the driver was watching The Voice on Hulu. Can you share any updates on that investigation?
I can't really get into any details on that. We are cooperating with the NTSB, and I do want to say that what happened to Ms. Hertzberg and that was just a tragedy for her and for her family, and it's something that really shook the company. The folks who were working in the ATG unit, again, just brilliant people. Many came from Carnegie Mellon to kind of work on this new technology. The reason they're doing it is because they believe, and I believe, and I think many believe, that ultimately an autonomous vehicle is going to be safer than a vehicle driven by a human. And there's a lot of reason to believe that will ultimately be true. That journey, though, is a difficult journey. And so when this happened, it shook people to the core. But we continue to work with the NTSB, cooperate with the NTSB on their investigation. Just hours after the incident, Dara ordered a top-to-bottom safety review of our practices and of our safety culture, and that work frankly is coming to a close now. It's been a long period of time, and I'm very pleased with some of the very strong recommendations that look like they're coming out of that. It was an independent led by Chris Hart, a former NTSB chairman. And so, there are things that we continue to do to try to always improve the safety of the culture, the safety of our platform. And again, that's, again, we see it as just intrinsic to the brand proposition.
So here's something you can talk about. One of your big moves has been ending forced arbitration, meaning that employees, drivers, riders can pursue claims of sexual assault and harassment in public. And Uber is a leader here. This is very uncharted territory. Corporate America does not do this. Should more companies do the same?
I think so. I think that this is an issue. We've worked with advocates in the sexual assault, sexual harassment space for some time now to really kind of understand the issue and understand, particularly on our platform, when it manifests itself, how do you respond to it effectively, and more importantly, how do you prevent it? And part of one of the outcomes of that process was our decision to end mandatory arbitration for individual claims of sexual assault and sexual harassment. And the reason is, or one of the reasons is, what is so powerful in the conversations I've had with advocates is the importance of returning agency and a sense of control to a survivor of sexual assault, sexual harassment. It is a crime that, in addition to being terribly underreported, it is a crime which strips agency and control from the individual in a way like nothing else does. And so the last thing you want is a process that imposes more control and more kind of a re-victimization in some sense. And so I think it was an important decision. I'm proud that we took that step. Yes, I do think others should take it because I think there's strength in numbers.
One more question before we turn it over to the audience. The Supreme Court has upheld the president's travel ban, meaning people from 7 different countries, 150 million people cannot travel to the United States. At the same time that the president is dealing with the blowback from legal family separations at the border. Is the law broken?
Well, the immigration laws have been broken for a long time. I do believe when it comes to separating children from families that we're a better nation than that. And it doesn't represent the best of who we are and our values. And with regard to the Supreme Court decision, and this is Tony West's opinion, this is not the opinion of Uber, look, I think I don't agree with the decision. I think that, as many have said, the Supreme Court is not final because it's infallible. It's infallible because it's final. And so that's the law of the land, and we will live with it.